great. So first of all, thanks, Rob, for joining me on the podcast. I think the first thing is to kind of introduce how both of us met. I know we've shared the same surname, so
Yeah,
the audience will
yeah,
probably wondering if we're related in some way. I guess potentially, maybe a
very
few
possible.
years ago.
Yep, very possible. Again, thank you for obviously introducing me and providing this opportunity to talk with you and definitely look forward to getting into the conversation here. Yeah, the LinkedIn obviously was kind of the first introduction that I got to you. So I mean that was kind of interesting from that standpoint to see somebody with my surname or last name and
Yeah,
then being in the same industry. So definitely thought, hey, let's connect, let's figure out how to communicate, and
yeah.
that's where we came to the conversation we had a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. And, it was an interesting conversation we had, particularly around obviously the differences between us over here in London and yourself over there in the States, and a lot of similarities, a lot of the same sort of problems and challenges that you guys face that, are being faced over here as well in facilities.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was interesting when we first got introduced that I was the first person driving on a Teams meeting with you. So I thought
Yeah.
that was kind of interesting. That's kind of commonplace over here. So we typically drive,
Yeah.
and we'll have meetings off location, and typically I'll have a drive time of somewhere in a range of an hour to 2 hours. So that's not uncommon for us.
I must admit, I've told a lot of people that I had this conversation with this chap from America, and he was doing a Teams call whilst driving down the freeway. And they're like, how is this possible? And I said, he's looking at the road, but every now and then when he hits like a stop sign or something like that, he'll look up and then talk to me. But the rest of the time, he's obviously maintaining his awareness. But yeah,
Yeah,
I've never had a Teams call with someone driving on the motorway before. Not something I'd recommend in the UK, by the way. You'll probably get
understand.
arrested. But I
Understand.
imagine, no, I imagine over there, it's obviously, like you say, it's common practice.
Pretty common. And again, we're using it for the phone with, directions, as well as, any type of meeting, and
Yeah.
probably some emails and some text messages as well. So it does happen from time to time.
No, it's certainly an interesting process without a doubt. It's something certainly to bear in mind, and I think we'll touch on that in a minute because obviously when we was talking, it's the sort of the distances involved that you guys cover. It is a world away from. Yeah, I think when we were talking, you were driving pretty much a third of the UK just to go and meet someone at the
Yeah.
time.
So in that conversation, I was driving up to South Bend, which
Yeah,
is roughly about 2.5 hours away from me. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I live and work in Indianapolis, which is kind of central Indiana. South Bend is more of a northwestern portion of the state. So
Right.
uh,
Okay.
roughly about 2.5 hours away.
Yeah, so there and back, 5 hours in a car to for a chat. That's a real commitment.
Well, so when you look at that, I mean, the overall opportunity up there was two chillers that we're probably going to replace up there. So
Mm,
um, that is something that's worth, time and the effort to go up there and look at and make sure that properly diagnosed. If we are replacing them, getting the right replacement chillers in the process too. So you look at roughly, 1,000, I'd say about 2,000 a ton for a
right.
replacement like that. And so those were right around 200 and I'd say 250-ton units. So, you're talking upwards of $400,000 worth of work.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
very easily.
yeah. I'll be happy to drive 5 hours for
Right?
$250,000. Yeah, that's no problem at all. Yeah, no. I mean, so just obviously background wise, I mean, we spoke briefly on the phone, but what's your background? How did you sort of get into the sector and your education really? Because I know you've got an MBA and you've been to
Yep.
university or college, and obviously you're now a director, obviously of the state.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, what's your background for the audience?
So, yeah, from a college perspective, I was at the University of St. Francis doing my undergrad over there, concentrated in in more of a management background. I did my minor in psychology, so wanted to have that kind of well-rounded background of education versus, how to deal with people. And then from there, moved to Cincinnati, which is about 2 hours east of Indianapolis, southeast of Indianapolis.
Yeah.
There, I started my MBA at Indiana Wesleyan University, and that provided me more of an applied management concentration with doing my MBA. And so everything that I was utilizing for, my work and what I was doing at the time with Turner Construction, that allowed me to kind of apply my MBA practices into my work environment as well. So that really kind of enabled me to, advance a little bit further and faster with that mentality. In about 2008, we had that downturn here in the States.
Big
and
crash.
that's when we kind of had, a second thought of, all right, where do we want to live? Where do we want to be? My family was kind of in between things. And so I found a service manager role within Indianapolis. And so we moved over to Indianapolis back in around 2010.
Okay.
And from there, I've been with Comfort Systems. I was service manager, moved into some sales roles, and then went over to Daikin Applied, which is big applied chiller manufacturer. Largest in the world, actually. So that became kind of my next step and my next, adventure as far as chiller sales and chiller maintenance. And then moved over to Honeywell, which is an even larger company. Honeywell on the building control side, did fire alarm, security, all the above. And then came over here to EMCOR, which is a very large company as well, worldwide. And now I'm in the chiller division. I'm director of the division. So
wow, so you've certainly been at a lot of the big guys.
Exactly.
Honeywell, EMCOR, because obviously you told me you was working for a company that EMCOR purchased as well, didn't you? And they sort of formed the chiller division.
So back in the mid 90s, I was working with Shambaugh and Son. So that was kind of right out of high school.
Right.
Working with them, kind of cut my teeth in that industry with the service side of things, and kind of the construction service side of everything kind of pulled me back in to that industry. So
so you've sort of come full circle almost.
Full circle, And so back here with EMCOR Services Shambaugh, which is a Shambaugh company, which is the parent company for EMCOR, right? So EMCOR is the parent company.
Brilliant. And in terms of, obviously, you look after the chiller side. Is there someone that looks after the sort of facilities maintenance side as well, like electrical, mechanical, or is that subbed out? I mean, is it specialist trades in America? How does it kind of work?
So it's kind of unique in our company because we actually are a full MEP. So we provide full MEP services. So mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So we can do it all, and it's really a question of what can't we do is really comes down to a question we would address with the customer. So we can facilitate a lot of the needs of a customer on their facility side of things, and if they ever need us to provide a project level of mechanical work, electrical work, plumbing work, whatever the case may be, we can do it all. And then we can also do the service side of everything. So once the project or once the building is built, we can actually service the equipment going forward too.
So that's really common in the UK, and I did know that in certain other countries, particularly like out in Australia, I know this, we're talking mainly about the United States, but they were quite traditional in the sense they'd have one company for electrical, one company for mechanical, one for AC. So to offer that sort of, like you say, all-inclusive, what we'd call total FM, is quite unique.
Pretty unique. And it is unique over here too. So, I mean, you typically run into those companies that are just mechanical or just electrical,
right? Okay,
just plumbing. So it is definitely unique in our industry to have all three, encompassed into one company.
And that's the EMCOR model over here as well in the UK. I mean, they've got some big contracts. in the UK, and I think obviously globally as well. So, no, brilliant. So obviously you've been in your role now for a few years. I
Yeah.
mean, what would you say has been the sort of the biggest challenges for you?
So, right now we're dealing with labor,
Right.
and more importantly, it's skilled labor, there's a huge gap between skilled labor
Yeah.
and then kind of our apprentice levels. And so,
Right.
having that middle gap kind of filled in
Yeah.
is really difficult for us.
Yeah, no, we touched on this, didn't we, when we
Yeah.
spoke last time? I mean, I think it's a work. Well, since talking to you, I mean, it certainly opened my eyes to the fact that it's probably a global problem. In fact, not just something unique to the UK.
Yeah.
And you've got that retiring generation, and then that huge gap, and then your apprentices, and it's quite interesting that it seems like a lot of companies, have found themselves in this situation. I haven't really spoke to anybody that I think's quite happy with the Labour
No,
situation.
and I mean, that's really where we're, trying to figure out ways to bring new guys into the industry.
Mm,
And then, how do you train them up as quickly as possible? And so,
yeah,
the challenges then becomes training them and getting those training needs addressed up front and see where they want to go and what they want to do.
yeah,
And then, from there, we have a lot of work. So it's not like, you don't have enough to do.
yeah,
It's just a matter of getting the right skilled labor in place.
yeah. I mean, where do you normally find these guys? I mean, is there like because see over here they'd come out of sort of what we'd call like high school, and then they'd go to like a trade school, I guess, which would be the
Yeah.
same over there, and that's how they sort of get picked up from afterwards from there. And I think really there's no sort of direct pathway still, even to this day, for people to get into it. You sort of have to rely on getting an apprenticeship, so to speak.
Exactly. So back when I went to high school, we had
Yeah.
actually a shop class. And so that was kind of the
Okay.
first introduction
Yeah.
to it back in the mid 90s,
Yeah.
late 80s, mid 90s. That all went away for some time.
Is
And
that
most,
what happened?
yeah.
So they
So
just stopped doing hands-on practical
yeah, they
education.
took it away in majority of our high schools around here, at least in the States and the Midwest.
Yeah.
That's slowly coming back now. So they see a need for that, and
Yeah.
they're starting to bring those programs back. And you see it more and more where the high schooler then becomes, an apprentice or a tradesman, and they've got to go through either a union. Here we have some union affiliation that provides the training and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Or if they don't go through a union, they got to go through some other trade or some other contractor to do their training. So some contractors are actually providing on the job training
Right. Okay.
with either their high school or a trade school in
Okay.
that process. And so they're providing a 2-year trade school in
Mhm.
conjunction with the subcontractor.
Okay. And do they get a sort of qualification at the end of it, or is it more of a
So most times they will get a certificate, or they'll
yeah.
get a actual college degree, a 2-year degree.
Okay.
in
Oh
something.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's worthwhile. I mean, our trade schools, our Ivy Techs, which is one of the trade schools or the universities within Indiana, they provide us with an actual 2-year degree, a diploma for our trades. Yeah,
Really? And
yeah.
and that's in like HVAC, is it, or
So it can be HVAC, it can be electrical, it can be majority of your
Hmm.
most of the industry type construction groups.
Nice. Okay. No, that's certainly of interest. I mean,
Yeah.
that's and I mean, is there a lot of guys signing up to that now, or because you sort of got a
Uh,
generation, I guess, of people who want to be TikTokers?
exactly. So the influencers out there and everybody. So typically you'll find a lot of those individuals coming back, and it's a matter of how do you get them to at least get excited about that. And
Yeah.
so would they rather sit on the couch and play influencer, or would they rather go out in the field and actually do some work? And so
Yeah.
that's a difficult proposition to make to them, and making that worthwhile to them. What would they rather do? And
Yeah.
many cases they probably rather sit on the couch or find
Mm,
something that they can do online. And
yeah.
so that's another difficult proposition to make with younger generations.
I think what I do wonder though is if once they do sort of get out there in the field and they get into the habit of getting out of bed, going to work, seeing the results of what they're trying to do each day come through, they sort of, like most people probably would get the bug for it and actually enjoy it to a certain degree, especially, sort of young men and women that are, full of energy and they haven't got much else going on apart from their social life, I guess.
When I started working, that immediate gratification of, you working with your hands, that was always something that fueled me every day. It's like, you could see your end product at the end of the day. And you don't always see that with your, videos, or you see that as a, total outcome, when you see somebody say like, or, does that give them that same feeling or same sense of pride? I don't know. I mean, that's where, the younger generation has to ask that question to themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's certainly, I think they have sort of a low self-esteem. I think I've read a lot about over the last few years, and, like you say, seeing that end product and, the results of their work each day and the accomplishment that comes with it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, once you have that, piece of equipment or piece of, construction built, you can see that your hard work and your effort went to, making something that somebody's going to use or utilize for the next 10, 20, 50 years, Yeah,
no, definitely. And because a bit like the UK, I think that a lot of guys and girls out there normally come into the industry via, like we said before in our last call, sort of family or their dad or their mum or whatever are in the sector. And that's been I think that the problem, hasn't it, to a certain degree? We've become a bit dependent on that kind of channel, I would say, of
so how do you bring that either into the fold or reinvigorate that generation with new offerings and new excitement for, the trades? And so we're seeing it here, at least in the high schools, kind of generate some interest. Trade schools, they're trying to bring in people, to at least excite them about the trade type of industry. And then, what keeps them there? So, that paycheck or that, promise of the paycheck at the end of the day.
It's not even so much the money. I know the money side of it is massive, but for a lot of guys, over here in the UK, you could probably be 21, 22 years old and probably earning, 40, 50,000 pounds, which is a really good wage. And there's not there's not a lot of your friends at that age that would be earning anywhere near that sort of money.
Now, when I came out of university or St. Francis, I was making 35,000 a year, right? So,
okay.
And that was, that was a long time ago, but it still wasn't that long ago. So the inflation rate has definitely outpaced that, first degree type situation. So being in a trade doesn't, it makes sense for most kids. And you could be well off in whatever that 4-year, 5-year period where it takes to get that degree.
Yeah, massively. And also as well, on top of that, you've got a skill for life. And I think particularly in a world now where it's quite easy to relocate as well, you're not designated just to your home country a lot of the time. If you're a skilled chiller engineer, you could pretty much work in any country in the world.
Correct. And we're actually seeing it, go across state lines here. Yeah. So, we're providing our chiller technicians in the state of Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois. So we cover roughly 4 to 6 states. We'll go out to Arizona even. So, there's things that we can do and, that other companies, other technicians can't do in that regard. So.
And that's massive for a young person as well, sort of broadening their horizons and getting out there into the different states or even into different parts of the world.
Agreed.
They're not doing it on a budget. So
no, and it's obviously you can make a living and provide a good living to your family too.
And in terms of like the certain sort of places you work, so to speak, you're mainly universities, commercial sort of property and things like that. Have you ever worked in any data centers or anything like that? Have you seen an increase in work for those?
So we're seeing a uptick in data centers, yes. And that's a real close-knit group. So you got to be in with a data center group. And so,
oh, really? Right. Okay.
oh yeah. So it's and those data centers really, are protected about, their intellectual data and their intellectual information that they provide. So they want to keep that close to the chest
Yeah.
and really hold that, kind of close as far as getting that information out to the public.
No.
It's not really widely known, no.
No. But obviously, from a HVAC point of view, there's plenty of chillers and cooling and whatnot that goes into them. I mean,
Most definitely. I mean, that really is, driving factor for those data centers, trying to keep the equipment cool in that process, because that all generates heat, and trying to make sure that those stay in a comfortable temperature or non-critical temperature is something that they're striving to do.
I mean, we've got a lot of data centers over here, in particularly around sort of the outskirts of London. I think we've got the most in Europe, in fact. And me and my colleague, we went on a data center course, and just one of those server racks, just opening one of those cabinet doors is the equivalent of an oven.
Oh, so, yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you could, like you say, the heat that's coming out of these things must be.
Yeah. The big trend is putting them in deserts, really. And so we're seeing them in those areas where not a lot of infrastructure is available to them. So they've got to have the power. They've got to have, some type of infrastructure to get their systems cooled in a way that, is beneficial to them. So it's usually somewhere it's humid, or not humid, but less humid and dry kind of, situation. So, you've got to provide that cooling in those, high temperature type areas like a desert, which is, pretty interesting.
No, it is definitely. I mean, it's certainly even in my time when I started out doing sort of recruitment in this sector, it was all about finding technicians to look after office blocks and things. And more recently, it's becoming more and more about data centers, and some of our biggest clients, that's a huge area they're looking into. So it's interesting to understand what your thoughts are, particularly over there in the US, because I know you guys have got a hell of a lot of data centers.
Yeah, I would say some of the other, things that we're challenged with, delays on our parts and materials.
Really? Okay.
Oh, it's 17 to 30 weeks in delays. And so where we used to have kind of on-demand type, supplies, it's just not that way anymore. That's, I think, post-COVID, things have delayed more and more. And, in some cases, chillers, we used to have pretty much a market that was available within 4 to 6 weeks. Now you're waiting at least, 30 weeks.
Really?
Oh, yes, most definitely. And you could be out 42 weeks pretty easily. So, you could be out almost a full year before you get to get that chiller in place. So this is not an emergency situation where you can just pull it off the shelf and then put it in place. So you got to actually plan it out. And that really becomes, the bigger issue is planning for those projects, planning for those, repairs in a manner that the customer understands. Because here today, gone for, tomorrow, it's more like gone for the next 17, 18 weeks.
Wow. And what is the reason behind that? Is that because they're being manufactured abroad? And
there's definitely different theories out there. But yeah, so there's definitely the supply chain issues that they've dealt with, shipping and things of that nature. People manufacturing them. They're challenged with their labor force as well. So, I get some of that too. They just don't have the availability of producing the equipment or the materials.
Wow.
So some of that becomes their labor shortages. Others, there's a high demand for this stuff. And so it's off the shelf before you can even, make an order.
Wow. And is that all? That's not been the case. Like you say before, what
No, no.
mate, so it's just literally the COVID sort of.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a hangover effect from that. I mean, there's definitely a lag from that that we're
Yeah.
experiencing. So when you look at kind of there's just the major chiller parts, chiller components, we're seeing delays again, in that 17 to 18 week period, and these are just normal parts, and so your normal shaft seal type components. Those are on delay for, multiple weeks, if not, months.
Wow. And the customers, I mean, how are they adapting to it? Is it a case they went out to market and
Well,
realized it's happening to everybody?
yeah,
So
it's a trickle down. So you see it from customer to customer, and then how they're dealing with it. They've got to build in their redundancy. So how
yeah,
do you have the redundancy in place to, ward off some of this excessive type of situations where you're seeing delays and after delays. So rental chillers seem to be a big uptick. And so we're seeing where the rental chiller is not available either. And so you've got kind of a twofold situation. Those that can get those rentals are in a good spot, but some cases they don't have them. So what we're trying to shift focus to is maybe providing that older chiller some new life
right.
and doing an overhaul or retrofit to that chiller and showing them to say, all right, this chiller is 20 years old. You don't need to replace it. It doesn't need to be replaced. It can be overhauled. You can actually, have another 30, 40 years out of this chiller
Yeah.
if you just replace maybe the controls on it, upgrade, some of the technology,
Right. Okay.
and then overhaul it so that, all the components are redone so that they all basically are returned back to new in that process.
That's interesting. I mean, have you thought about having, those ones that you rip out and take away? Do you ever strip those down and take some of the parts away and recycle them and get them sort of
So there has been some of that, where we'll kind of scab some of the parts off an old chiller and
yeah,
bring that into one of either, the used chillers or the one that's in a better condition. So yeah,
yeah,
we can do that. In those scenarios though, those are typical of like air cooled chillers where we're it's almost like a boneyard when you're out in that customer's chiller field. And so, when they have that situation, they're in a bad spot because they don't have new chillers. They've got a bunch of used parts and they're just getting by.
right, okay,
So
yeah,
that is typically good for a service company to come in and do.
yeah,
It's not good for that company because if they're down, they could be down weeks and, waiting for parts, waiting for, components,
yeah,
waiting for a rental.
yeah, yeah. And I guess at that point, money becomes no object in terms of, especially if you're in a roasting hot summer in a university and the students can't
Or,
sit in their
or
class.
yeah, or it's a process. And so it's a process chiller. And they're trying to get market, product off their lines. And so, you know, if they're down with their product for, day, 2 days. And so that's costing them money if they can't produce their product too.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that bad.
Oh,
Yeah,
so in some cases it can be really that bad, but in some or in most cases, customers have planned it out so that they have redundancy.
yeah,
There's an ability to, maybe have a secondary or third chiller in place so that they can have that redundancy. So pull on that, that chiller
yeah,
when necessary.
yeah. I mean, is there any other challenges that you're facing out there at the moment apart from those two? Would you say?
So I'm talking about some of the skilled labor and
Yeah,
the delays and everything else. Some of it's just balancing all that stuff out. So it's like
yeah,
the balancing act between all the jobs that you're trying to get complete and trying to get parts and trying to get materials and things like that. So it becomes kind of a juggling act of what's available and making sure that we have enough work in place and
yeah,
bringing in more work and trying to make sure that the guys have backlog of work to do.
spinning the plates, so to
Yes.
speak. Yeah. How many guys have you got under you at the moment?
So we have 6 technicians, chiller technicians,
Okay.
in place right now, and that's covering those 4 states that we talked about. We're looking to add probably another 3 to 4 technicians within the next 2 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And those guys, I think when we spoke, they were doing a good few 100 miles to get to each job. So
Well, they can, yeah. So it depends on, where the job is, if it's middle Indiana or if it's southern Indiana or if it's northern Indiana. It just depends on where they're going or if it's up in Michigan. So who's got to drive up into Michigan? Who's got to drive over to Illinois?
yeah.
Who's got to drive over to Ohio? So that yes, it becomes a challenging situation for those guys at times.
Because with a lot of the guys in London, they would have their sort of what we'd call like their planned works, their PPM works, and then they might get a call, of a reactive call to go to the other side of London to go and deal with, like, say, a fault or a major, issue. I
Yeah.
mean, the same with you guys. So you've got someone over in this state, and then they've got to cross over into another state to try and deal with a fault, and they're sort of all moving around on the map all day.
Very easily, yeah. So we get into those situations very often where a chiller goes down and we've got to provide a guy, either in Michigan or Indiana, and they've got to drive 2 to 3 hours to get there. Yeah, most definitely. That's not uncommon. We get into, when a chiller goes down, what are the options to get it back up and running? Is it a quick fix or is it something that's major? And so you get into those, situations where if it's, simple call, they'll just call the technician and see if they can just reset the chiller right then and there. Or if it's a major situation where they have to replace a shaft seal or something to that effect, a compressor, and then we'll have to quote it, say, it's another 8 weeks out. So they've got to wait 8 weeks to get this chiller back up and running. So they've got a plan for that. Hopefully they've got backup. Hopefully they've got some redundancy in that chiller plant to take on the extra load.
Yeah, definitely. And so you'd have like EMCOR mechanical, electrical guys on these sites, for example, say running a university, doing the facility side, and then they would contact the chiller guy to come and help.
Correct. And so we have that level of expertise where they know they can triage most of the situation.
Yeah, the first
triage. Yeah, once that triage happens, then they can call in the chiller expert to provide, additional services.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how it works over here as well. So yeah, a lot of similarities there. No, definitely. There's always that sort of the technicians on site, he can do, like you say, the reset. He knows, BMS, he can, do that initial, like you say, fault find before the special forces come out, so to speak. And
exactly. They bring us in, yes.
And they deal with it. So obviously we're looking ahead and the future. Obviously you guys are, on the other side of the world. I mean, there's a lot of, noise over here about green technology and saving energy and cost savings through analysis of, vibration analysis and sticking basically these sensors on different plant and finding out, if they're switching themselves on in the middle of the night, so to speak, and costing everyone a fortune when really it was just someone set it up incorrectly years ago. And the customers actually spent, I don't know, like $1 million in the last 20 years because this boiler's been turning itself on at 1 a.m. Is that what's going on over there in terms of?
I would say that those are definitely similar situations, and we have that across the United States as well. And what we're seeing is, the green initiatives, but we're also seeing kind of a pinch on our electricity, utilities, charges are going up, the threats of brownouts are going up.
Really?
Oh yeah. And so you've got infrastructure that's aging on the electrical side. So, there's a ton of talk around, how do we get the infrastructure taken care of as a country, as a whole? What does that look like? As far as, sustainable electrical production, as far as what's going to be the next big thing? Is it going to be air? Is it going to be solar? Is it going to be nuclear? that becomes a bigger question in some cases. And then, from a chiller side, we see a lot of the conversation around the refrigerants being used. And so we're getting into conversations of, cycling or ending some of those older refrigerants and basically cycling those out of their storage facility. So phasing out more of like the R22 or R410A, R11, trying to cycle those or phase those out. What becomes the new refrigerants that are going to replace those? And that becomes some of the utility cost and energy savings that those new refrigerants provide, and the GWP, which is the global warming potential. What's that going to be? Trying to reduce that GWP on the United States or across the world in most cases.
And is that something your customers are keen to get interested in, or is because I mean some people, I don't know, because America's such a vast country. I'd imagine some people over in California are obsessed with it, and then I imagine some people maybe in the Midwest or whatever, they're not so bothered, and then maybe New York, it's a real collection of, I can imagine, so many different people.
Oh yeah, so
people are absolutely obsessed with it in London.
So it does definitely become a melting pot of everything here, and so you've got the East Coast, West Coast that are really heightened and uber sensitive to those types of situations, and they are really kind of focused, on reducing that spend, reducing that utility cost. And in the Midwest, it's not as costly, so we can get by with some of that stuff, and so our dollar stretches a little further than the East Coast or the West Coast. But that is starting to grow. And so that interest is definitely growing. And you see more and more of it day to day where customers are asking the question, or you as a, responsible company provide that information to them and say, are you thinking about this? And then they have the question of, oh, no, I'm not, but what should I be looking at?
Yeah, does that not form part of the sales pitch for you guys to be like, if you upgrade your kit, you're going to save X, and because you're saving this, basically the new kit's going to cost you nothing, so to speak. And is that part of the big sell, or is that something not really looked at the moment?
So yeah, we try to bring in that return on investment type of mentality with that sale. When you're talking through that with
just got cut off then was before the power went out, believe it or not.
Power went out.
But yeah, so that's certainly something that's being looked into, but your dollar stretches further in the Midwest and the other states. So but overall it's a theme that's certainly becoming more influential.
Yeah, so again, going back to the return on investment, when we're talking that through with the customer, and that's a part of our sales process that really comes down to hitting that home as far as what this return on investment looks like. If it's less than a 2-year payback period, and the customer really wants to invest that more. So we try to look at that return on investment for our customers, provide that information in a financial type of scenario where it's very beneficial to them. And then the longevity of that project or that, service then becomes, what do you recoup going down, 10 years from now or 15 years from now? In some cases, you reduce your utility spend, and those are, captured multiple years after you do that repair or that replacement. So that's not something that they just see immediate, gains from. They'll see, those gains across multi-years. So, that's something they have to factor into it as well. So as they get more and more utility savings, that efficiency gain, they can apply it from year to year going forward too as well.
No, it's certainly, worth their while in terms, especially some of the kit. And I can imagine like college campuses out in the US and things like that, they're probably, enormous. I mean, how many plant rooms are we sort of talking in terms of a standard university building.
And typically you're going to run into 1 to 2 chiller plants within a university. So, and that's,
Right, okay.
that could be 4 chillers in the chiller plant. It could be upwards of 6 to 8 chillers in those chiller plants.
Yeah, per plant. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, interesting. Fine. And then in terms of looking ahead, I mean, I'm repeating myself now, but say you're a young man or a young girl and you're looking at what you want to do in the future. I mean, have you got any advice? I mean, you've been in the game a long time. I mean,
yeah. So, if you're looking to be a technician in this industry, the sky's the limit, really. There's an immediate demand for individuals, and that goes across, gender and, age and everything else. And so we're trying to facilitate bringing those individuals in, and then training them as quickly as possible. So if you're in a trade school, look to, further your education any way you can, from high school to either the trade or some universities. More universities are providing these types of degree programs on a regular basis. So it doesn't have to be 4 to 8 years of college degrees. You can be pretty much in place, making money from day one, and then making sure that you're doing some type of supplemental type of training or degree process in the bigger scheme of things.
Yeah, no, it's exactly true, and exactly the same over here in the UK. It's no point going and studying, I guess, a politics degree or something like that when practical uses, like HVAC and electrical and things like that, they're going to carry you for the rest of your life, so to speak. And out there, I mean, do you see many female technicians, or is that?
From time to time we do. This is definitely a male-dominated industry. However, yes, from time to time we see a lot of females actually asking the question and then taking that one step further and actually becoming a technician.
Right.
So slowly they're migrating towards that
route,
process, that move. Yes, agreed.
And I'm hoping that someone who's maybe considering their options or whatever, or someone who's going to maybe pick this up off LinkedIn one day, feels inspired from some of the things you said today, Rob. And
hope so.
And I really appreciate your time and everything you
James, definitely appreciate you introducing me and providing me this opportunity to talk to you again. This has been fun. I enjoy it, and make sure that we continue to have a conversation going forward.
No, brilliant. And you never know, I might be filming it with you next time, and I'll come out to see you.
Oh, great. Even better. Even better. Come
we'll
on
do
over.
It in person. We'll do it in person next time.
Yeah, come on over.
Yeah.
We'll have a great time.
I'll go and talk to the missus and see if I can get approval. And I'll
Good luck with that one. Good luck with that.
No, perfect. No worries. Well,
All right.
thanks very much for your time.
Yep. Thank you.